And welcome back to another fresh episode of the Daddio Show. I'm here with a special guest today. First, I want to just tell you who we are and what we're doing. This is the Daddio Show weekly podcast series. It's kind of a virtual mentoring session for not only youth, but also guys in the community who are looking to do some mentoring, some pouring into young people, and they just want to get sharper and kind of understand ways to do that better, see what's working well out there. This is brought to you by partnerwithgreatness.com. It's a youth development platform here in Central Kentucky. Now on to introducing today's special guest. This is my pastor. This is Mark Dunn from Broadway Christian in Lexington. So, man, it's a huge pleasure and honor to be on here with you today, Mark.
I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Heck yeah. So I know you a little bit. We've had the chance to kind of do the Panera coffee thing and chop it up a little bit, which was a lot of fun. Looking forward to learning even more about you today on the podcast and letting just excited to share you with the listeners. Mark and I were talking before we hit the record button that both of us kind of fall into that extrovert, creative, goofball category, so I just go into little bro mode automatically around you. I'm like, all right, this is one of my
people. That's right. You name it, we'll try it, man. That's it.
That's right. Dude, I got so excited about doing this podcast with you. I made the fatal mistake of rushing through my shaving. I sliced out. Looks like Freddy Krueger got a hold of me with his claws, man. I made a few nicks. I was like bleeding from the throat before I had to up a little bit.
I kind of wish you had left it just to freak everybody out.
What kind of a podcast is this? Have you ever shaved with one of those just like straight blade razors?
Oh, don't tell me you use a straight razor.
I did, and I know it's like a very meditative, like you got to just relax and go with it thing. I paid the price for getting too excited today.
Oh, for real? Oh my gosh.
Well, man, we made it here in one piece. Not too much blood loss. Tell us about kind of who you are, what your family is like, and what's going on with the Dunn clan these days.
Okay, I'll try to give you the short version, especially as it applies to our concept of parenting. But born here in Lexington, was adopted officially at about 4 weeks old. My birth mother, I found her when I was in my 40s, but her name was Martha, was at the Florence Crittenden home. I was born then at what was called Good Sam Hospital and adopted here. I don't remember an age where I didn't know I was adopted. My parents told me early on, and so I was always aware of that. Right. But my family made a concerted, intentional effort of making sure I understood that I was wanted and that they had to go through a lot of work to get me.
Right.
My grandmother especially would always say that, you were so wanted. You should remember how much your parents went through to get you. And she always wanted to affirm that. They wanted to affirm that. And wow. Really, for the first 10 years of my life, it was just like an old sitcom. I mean, everything was wonderful. We lived in a nice neighborhood. You could see our church from our front door. Everything was walking. We went outside and played as friends till it got dark. Our parents knew each other. I mean, it was truly like a sitcom. Then when I was 10 years old, my father passed of brain cancer. And when I say father and mother, I mean the people who raised me. Mm-hmm. So my father died of brain cancer. And for the next 4 years, I was officially fatherless. It was me, my mother, my sister. My sister came from a different birth parent also. And then eventually, 4 years later, my mother remarried and I got a wonderful stepfather. I mean, again, it was, just incredible how good God has been to me and the people he put in that job who weren't biological, but were just better than you could imagine. Yeah. My stepfather had a daughter. His wife had passed of cancer, and my mother and he met at church. And so we went from being a family of 3 to a family of 5 that had its, moments, but it all came together. I would say from a parenting perspective, that did create a different dynamic though, because by the time the stepfather comes on the scene, you're 14 and a lot of decisions he would consider your mother's decisions because he's not the father who raised you or adopted you or whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
And so he was absolutely fantastic. But there would be a lot of times he would say, well, yeah, it's up to your mother. What does your mother think?
Yeah.
And so I would say all of those things factor into who you are. So I was thinking this morning, knowing we were going to talk about parenting, I may have been a tad bit nervous. Like, I hope I don't say anything stupid, but which is probably going to happen no matter what. But anyways, I thought, what's the simplest way to sum up my parenting knowledge? It would be this. I went from knowing almost nothing, right, especially as a fatherless child for a while,
Yeah.
to a youth minister who was cocky and thought he knew much more than the parents of the kids he was teaching, to a guy who had kids and realized how much he didn't know.
Yeah.
And then you realize a lot of this, there is no manual. You're kind of flying by the seat of your pants anyways.
Yeah.
To a guy who thought he knew a lot, and back to a guy who says, now with grown children, okay, I see some things I was extreme on, some other things I was lax on. It's now you find yourself at that point saying, I did the best I could. I wonder if that was the right thing, but I did the best I could. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting EKG look in parenting.
Yeah. Go ahead and smash the love button on that, folks. I think if
Yeah.
we're being honest, there's a lot of folks who can relate to that up and down or cycles type of evolution, going through all those phases where you think you know something and you realize you know nothing, and on and on.
One of the simplest is when I was a youth minister, I had 300 foot of rappelling rope and all the gear, and I used to rappel, go off cliffs and, waterfalls and bridges, that kind of thing. And so I wanted to take some of the older kids in my youth group rappelling, and I always got pushback by parents. They didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of say to myself, man, well, I got a kid. I'm not going to be this scared to let them live. I'm going to let them get out, Then you get a kid and you're like, you're not doing half the stuff I ever did. You're not doing that, and so
You'll die if you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of some of the stuff now, and if my teenager had said, I'm going to go do this, I'd have been like, no, I'll slit every tire on your car before you'll go do that,
Yeah, yeah. I used to like jumping off the barn roof for fun and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Who does that?
We went down to the Kentucky River, swam across the river, climbed up the cliffs, and did cliff diving for fun. Now I would tell my son that's like a prescription for paralyzation. You're not going down there.
Right. Oh, wow. You got so you have a wife and how many kids?
So I've been married since 1985.
Yeah.
And we first dated in 81, Kathy, and then we have a son, Max, and a daughter, Morgan.
So cool. And what are they up to now, the kids?
Yeah. I had my first child when I was 30, and the second one is 34.
Yeah. What are they into now?
My son is a State Farm agent. And my daughter works at a bank. He's married and she's not. He's older than her. So, and they're doing good.
Yeah. My brother
working right through the virus.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're working right through the virus.
Yeah. That's a blessing to be able to work. My brother and I are separated by a little over 4 years. He's older than me. Always been the baby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's some good things that come with that position.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You kind of get to see things play through the first time and maybe learn from it. I've always been kind of too stubborn to learn from other people's mistakes, though. And it used to frustrate my brother so much. Be like, I've told you the recipe here. Like, you don't have to screw this up. And you're going to go do it anyway. I'm like, I got to learn my way. I don't know.
But as parents, we do the same. We tell our kids, I made this mistake. You don't need to make it. And yet they go make it. So I guess that's really indicative of all of us.
Rebellious by nature, huh?
The good thing is the baby, though, is by then the parents have mellowed.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, everything that, when your first child comes along, first off, everything's got to be protected and careful. And also you're so concerned about raising this right child that, probably, if anything, maybe too harsh sometimes. Like, I want to get this right, and I'd seen so much in my youth ministry, especially. We waited 7 years before we had kids. So,
Mhm.
I had seen kids really lose their way in life. I had a young man in one of my ministries end up in jail. And so, you all that factors in, and you think, I really want to do this right. I've seen some other images. I've seen good and bad, and I want to really do this right. Then by the time you get that second one 4 years later, you're like, that's okay. That's, and they're looking like, hold it, I got discipline for that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That sounds so familiar. I think my brother got about 5 times the spankings I did.
I think my son would attest to that same idea.
Yep, no doubt. Um, so let's. So you're a pastor, but you're also you're a businessman. You're a man of different talents, and you've got an identity. As a citizen outside of just being a pastor. Uh, I like you for one reason because you're well rounded, and I want to pick your brain a little bit for the listeners about fatherhood from your pastoral, spiritual point of view, and also see if you can kind of swing it for us to more of maybe a worldly or a practical view. Not that the spiritual thing is impractical, but a view of fatherhood for maybe folks who aren't already in the church or who aren't leading with their faith, if that makes any sense. So can
Sure.
you kind of give us like that two-sided or well-rounded view of fatherhood and why it's important and the purpose and the role of it?
Yeah, from the spiritual side point, I would say, a couple of weeks ago in one of my sermons, I mentioned this is officially a temporary home.
Yeah.
And the actual line I use is, we're just floating on a giant mobile home, waiting for our real home. So I said, no offense to realtors. I understand they're doing their job, but there's no such thing as a forever home this side of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality, in the garden, God called Adam to be a steward of that garden. And that stewardship was over all the creatures there at the time, but it really applied on to his family. So from a spiritual standpoint, we have to have some realization that we call ourselves parents, but we're really more stewards, managers. This life is not ours. This young child is not ours. We've been given a task, but his life is his own. And so the best thing we can do is steward him and her in a way that prepares them for a spiritual relationship with Christ, so that they are prepared when this mobile home stops turning.
Yeah.
So having that mindset that this is a spiritual calling, and like all things, some days that flies out the window, and some days that's strong and powerful. But having that realization that you have this higher calling, this purpose for behind that, and the inroad of that purpose is not the best ball player. It's not the best economics. It's not that, the old adage that, you want your child to be a lawyer or a doctor. It's really, you want your child to be in connection with Jesus Christ. And so on the spiritual side, you might say the end game looks different often from the non-spiritual side. But I think you have to cover both those roads. And of course, the more eternal and significant one is the one that's going to last forever, which would be the eternal one.
Mm-hmm.
So the sad thing is, we tend to, as humans, put a lot more emphasis on the other, which is temporal. So finding that balance is important and crucial. And I think, unfortunately, we get a lot of wisdom after we've gotten past, much of the job, but
Yeah.
that's how it tends to go.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a good friend of mine down in Wilmore named Bob Moore. Excuse me. He was on the podcast. He had an episode, and what you said about the stewardship view of parenting, which stewardship, meaning temporary ownership, holding something as if it were valuable with the view of you're going to pass it on or give it up to another owner one day. I asked Bob, his kids they're young adults, they're grown now, and I asked him, Bob, it seems like your kids just really, really turned out well. Like, what was the magic sauce behind that? How did you influence them? Like, because I know we're all fallible. We're not perfect as humans, as parents. So, with all your flaws and I'm sure many mistakes, how did you get that to happen? How did they turn out so well? And he said, well, I just always made sure to pray them over and give them over to God, just, almost daily, just release them, pray them over to God, and give up their lives to God. And I was like, wow, that's deep and almost a scary sounding thing to do. Can you, does that vibe with you? Have you ever thought of it that way, as far as like just releasing control of your kids in that spiritual perspective? Because you're not their ultimate father, you're their earthly father. Does that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, and that point becomes much more easy to grasp again as you go through the process. Early on, it's hard to really get that perspective, but as you go, that grows. I was thinking about it. It's kind of like the guy who's your money manager. He has a fiduciary duty. He has this legal term
Yeah.
of, that guides how he's supposed to act. And sometimes you're going to lose money even while he was doing his fiduciary duty. Sometimes you're going to make money even while he's doing his fiduciary duty. But for him, the main point is to make sure he's doing his duty as prescribed and, technically what's legal. So to some degree, the greatest asset we are managing from God is another life. And we have this fiduciary duty. And sometimes it'll look like it steps backwards. Sometimes it'll look like it steps forward. But, we can't always control which way it goes any more than the money guy can control the market. But we can make sure we maintain that duty. And
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what your friend was saying. He just always sought that position. And like I say, sometimes, especially in the heat of whatever moment, whether it's something they're going through, you're going through, sometimes we all lose it. But trying to keep the awareness of that is the best perspective I think we can have parental,
Yeah.
spiritual parental.
Is it sorry, is it hard to get young people, your own kids in general, youth, is it hard to get them to understand these dynamics of, you know, I'm trying to serve your best interests even though I'm going to screw up, and like I may not know everything and I might be wrong a lot of the time, but I'm still trying to do what's best for you. So that's, you should therefore listen to me because I'm trying to do what's best for you. Has that been a classic struggle to communicate that effectively to kids?
I found with my own, and again, and I said this to them literally. I would go in sometimes, especially if I maybe overreacted to a situation. I would go in sometimes and just say, "Look, I don't know if I did the right thing here. There's no manual. I lived the age you're living without a father, and I don't remember much of the before the 10-year-old age. I don't remember the parenting stuff. I just remember the fun stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just go in and be honest. I'd say, I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know what is the right thing. I'm trying to do the best I can. I would, even when they were young, I would go in and apologize. If I felt like I overreacted, I'd go in and apologize. But,
Yeah,
I tried to communicate I'm doing the best I can.
yeah. So my I knew in my teaching profession that I had reached a point where my students were starting to feel like comfortable or safe around me, and it wasn't in the first 5 years. I was pretty tightly wound. Actually, it may be hard to believe, but I don't know that you get, as a younger teacher, you get caught up in these power struggles in your mind, and it's all just in here, and makes everybody clamp up and tighten up, but as I started to mature through that, sometimes one of my students would say, Mr. Hobby, you seem a little stressed, man. Like, it's okay, man. Like, we're going to get through this. They kind of console and, comfort me through my moment, because they could tell like I was just not handling something well that I normally wanted to be, a little bit more relaxed. So I thought those moments were beautiful where it's like, who's teaching who here? Who's mentoring
Yeah.
who? It's like, this is good. This is really working here. And hopefully I'll have the humility to receive it when it happens and like release and just be like, oh, you're right. I need to chill for a second here. We'll get back on track.
I think those moments are hard as a parent, at least early on. There's a period where you go from parent to more like a friend, but early on, I think as the parent, those are hard.